Hello, everybody. It is Bricky today. I hope you are having a fantastic Friday. I was a little late for the last one, and I have been doing lots of moving and getting my stuff back to the house. And now that I am back to the house, I realized that bada bing, bada boom, it's Friday, Fireside Friday. Might as well kind of talk of it that way. Also, there was a plane currently flying over my head. Good God. Thank you, Shotgun Microphone. Thank you, Sennheiser MKH416, the industry standard microphone for 40 years that I can beat someone to death with. But anywho, I am back, and I'm here to chat a little bit more. There is one person as well, a viewer, who suggested that I start putting these Fireside Brickies on Spotify, or it was just the various podcast platforms in general so that you can listen to it that way. I think it's actually a really good idea. In fact, so much so, I'm actually going to make a brand new YouTube channel for it as well. I'll put the link in the description of this one, but obviously it hasn't going to have anything on it for a bit. I'm going to start populating it over the course of the next week. But then from there, might as well just kind of make this all side thing. It's just a once per week ramble, so it's not like it's going to take a whole lot of effort to maintain it. So it's going to be all good. Anyway, I wanted to go ahead and answer one of the questions that I have going on here, which is said by That Spooky Rat. It says, "Howdy, Bricky. Hope you're having a good day whenever you read this. As with other people here, I've got a question for you. How do you manage your expectations in regards to projects or videos you create? I can imagine that bigger projects like the more recent Every Faction Explained series took a lot of planning and preparation, structure, and layout. But even your smaller videos like Blueprints, it must have taken at least some strong organization to make the video you wanted in a good time frame. So how do you balance the expectations and scope of what you want the project to end up as with the timeline of when you want the project to release?" So that's actually a really interesting one. I wanted this one to be a generally easier, less hard-hitting episode of Fireside Bricky, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that specifically. So managing a project, especially some of the stuff that I have in the pipeline, it really depends on the scope of the project. And it also depends on passion for it. Passion is a terrible motivator. Maybe not some way. Motivation is a terrible worker, is some of the way. So motivation and passion are really, really good to push you when you have it and absolutely just do nothing for when you don't. So if you are really motivated to do something, you can get a lot done. But the moment that motivation is gone, it's a very bad way to keep you on that project. I hate to call out any of my artist fans out there, but the amount of unfinished projects that you are going to eventually get back to doing is very high because motivation is what makes you do it in the there and then, but what you may lack is a certain level of adherence. Motivation and passion are good for the start, adherence and discipline are good for the later. And having that kind of discipline and adherence is one of the main ways I'm able to get through some of my stuff. It's also, ironically, kind of funny. One of the ways I've gotten through a lot of my major projects is actually due to sponsorships. Not because I wanted a sponsor, but because the sponsor had a deadline. And so sometimes I actually am able to get through projects at a reasonable rate because I have to, because they need a specific upload date. And by doing so, when I notice that fast approaches, having a deadline for me is actually a really good way to keep me just mentally motivated for the stuff. It forces me to do something. I think having deadlines is actually huge, even self-deadlines. And actually having deadlines within the project is also a very important thing to do. Making sure that you set specific goals and specific timeframes for yourself so that when you meet those goals, you can keep yourself on track. A nebulous, this project is going to be done is just not enough for you to get it done. It's actually one of the reasons why the big Warhammer documentary is taking so long, is because there is no necessary deadline and a lot of other things have come up, so it keeps getting pushed back and back. If there was a harsh deadline that I needed for it, I would have absolutely been pushing myself to get that one done far sooner than expected. Another thing that I find to be really helpful is just knowing when to solicit the help of others. And this is not always feasible for everything, but obviously I myself have some editors that help my stuff. I have a editor, some of you may know them as Shammy. She has done many projects for her own channel before and is actually helping me out with various highlights, but most of my main channel work is hers as of the last couple of months. In addition, I have a editor, Will, who does all of my second channel stuff, highlights and stuff, gathers footage from other people I stream with for collabs and so on. The two of them have a great just working kind of mentality when it comes to a lot of the stuff, and I give them general deadlines and things for when I need stuff to be completed. And then that goes from there. I will say I also occasionally elicit the help of Possum, the researcher for Adeptus Ridiculous, to help me with specific stuff. In fact, you may have noticed his handiwork on that blueprints video I did prior, because that video and all of the various things with Tonda Ross and the maze book back when, that was all things I learned thanks to him and him combing through large amounts of interviews I did not have the time for. In fact, just knowing when to ask for help, I think is something that everyone can learn a little bit more from and be able to garner a lot of help to just get your mind in there, you know? However, not all of you obviously will have that level of help, especially for myself, who didn't about 5 years ago, for example. The first 5+ years of my YouTube career, I did everything myself. And so having a personal deadline is a really big one, and also just knowing what parts that deadline needs to hit. So, hey, I need my script to be done by, let's say it's a new month, it's October, by the 7th. And then I need all of the editing to be done by the 10th, and then I need it to be uploaded on the 12th. Just making sure you hit those deadlines and splitting them up in that method is just very, very helpful. And not only that, but having a reason to light a fire under your ass in order to do so. You know, if you're going to have a deadline that you need to hit, there needs to be a problem. There needs to be an issue for what happens if you don't hit that deadline. You need to make sure that if you are trying to hit that deadline, you are not necessarily in a position to where you can just ignore it. There needs to be either positive or negative reinforcement that comes along with it. And that can be all kinds of reasons. There isn't really a perfect methodology for that. It kind of just comes down to how you think is the best course of action, or what you think is the best course of action to do all of that stuff. And then, you know, from there, it really just kind of comes down to your personal preference. Maybe you reward yourself with something good if you make it on time. But honestly, the reward is that you actually get your project out on time. And getting things out on time normally means you get more things out. And that normally means more money or more creative process and freedom if you are doing it purely for a creative standpoint and not a financial one. But it feels like everyone's turning their hobbies into financial stuff nowadays anyway. But from there, you know, a lot of the actual bits and pieces of preparing the structure and layout and that kind of stuff, keeping it in a good time frame, deadlines. That's a really big one. Expectations of scope, that's a tough one. I think it really comes down to scope creep and knowing exactly what you want the project to be. Some things have changed. For example, I know some of you are waiting on the Mass Effect video that I've said I'm going to do 40 million times. And I actually have a due date for that video. I have a deadline for that video, and I know exactly what I want that video to be. However, at the same time, I will also look at the Mass Effect video and realize that I've changed the scope. I was going to do a video for every single Mass Effect game and talk about the in-depth bits of each and every one of them, much like the Uncharted series, but I found there's actually a little bit too much going on there. The Uncharted ones work really well because it's a straightforward linear story, where the Mass Effect is much more of an RPG and has a lot of moving parts. So instead, I kind of wanted to talk about the history and the story of Mass Effect, how it went, how it maintained, how it has this cultural impact on a lot of people like myself, and also where it went wrong, how things happened at the end of the cycle for Mass Effect 3 and also with Andromeda. Particularly a very poignant bit of information, considering that we are just having this new EA acquisition, and oh goodness gracious, golly gee, does it look like it's going to be a massive pile of crap. So that's also a big one to try to adjust the scope. I will say certain things like blueprints, I originally just wanted to talk about the game a little bit, and then I got really infatuated with the concepts behind the game, so I worked a lot more in trying to figure out specifics for it, trying to look for all of the individual bits with Tonda Ross and how he did it. And I honestly think that the blueprints video is one of my better ones. It didn't really get a lot of views or anything like that, but I just think that I did a much better job at what I was trying to do. It feels a bit more impactful, I guess is the phrase, a bit more solidified on what I was trying to do. I think it was a little bit more focused. Yeah, focused might actually be the right call. I'd say focused. So yeah, I think it just feels a little bit more focused, a little bit more directional, a bit more a scalpel, not a hammer. If you want to be really pedantic about it. And so that was one of the big ones that I thought was quite, like, oh, hey, this is just a really interesting video. It's fun, and it's a bit more of a passion project. Blueprints is not a crazy game that's going to be like screeching to the heavens, but it was fun. Going from that, I will say the only other major thing that I would want to really discuss when it comes to the bigger projects is just, I guess, knowing how you want it to be visualized. Mood boards and things like that are really good. I am in love with the database app / note-taking / whatever you want to call it, Notion. Notion is what I do almost everything on. It costs money. It's like a classic database and stuff like that. But I put a ton of my concepts. I put like my mood board things. I add various kinds of Excel type sheets and various databases all into that. So I know what I'm really aiming for. I also use it as kind of like a stream of consciousness thing. Whenever I think of a really interesting bit idea or maybe like a really funny concept, I'll throw it in there for any of the kind of content that I'm working on, and then maybe I'll be able to do some cool stuff with it. For example, I have a quick a stream idea. Here was one of them. I remember way back when I had the idea. Oh goodness gracious! It was. I wanted to do deathbed streaming, where I made a fake like hospice bed that I would stream from and hire like a fake nurse. And if people donated on one way, it was prayers, and the other one was poison. And the stream ends if I ran out of prayers and I had too much poison and I died, and then the stream would end. And just like stuff like that. I thought it's maybe a little bit, it might be a little bit edgy, but I just like ideas like that. I just come up with randomly in the middle of the night and I write it down in here. And then, I go ahead and take that idea, not this one specifically, but ideas like that. And I kind of twist them and put them together. And I use like various things like either boards or resources or concepts or ideas. And I just kind of put them together, and then you find a way to make sense of it. It's like you grab a million things, throw it into a room, and you find a way to organize it properly. And everyone can take notes. Everyone can have ideas. Acting on the ideas is the really hard part. Knowing how to take ideas that you had and then turn them into actual tangible things, that's the real toughie. But I will say, once you do and it works out, that's really impressive. And that's where the adherence and the discipline come from. Like I said before, motivation and passion are terrible workers. Because, and I've learned this myself with hiring actual real life workers that I pay W-2s to, is that a worker that is 90% strong 60% of the time is substantially worse than a worker that's 60% strong 100% of the time. Consistency is always key. I care the most about someone who does the same work every time. Even if their work isn't as good as others, I care that they just do the same. And if they end up doing more, well, I probably should pay them more, And at that point, it's all about that consistency. So anyway, discipline, adherence, set deadlines for yourself, set timelines for yourself, and make sure that by doing so, you adhere to them, either through positive or negative reinforcement, whatever is best for yourself. And then after that, the other big thing you would want to do, of course, is follow it and keep to it. Have a nice little board, do the various types of brainstorming, work from there. And yeah, that's the way it goes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little small Fireside Bricky. I'll go ahead and keep you updated when it comes to the other channel and the podcast stuff. I'll keep you in the loop. I plan on just keeping this going, hopefully every Friday this time around. All right, thanks again for listening. I'll see you around.